Hi, I'm Gabe Mejia, and this is my movie review. So, the movie that I chose was The Orphanage, or El Orfanato. The directors were J.A. Bayona, which is short for Juan Antonio Garcia Bayona, Guillermo del Toro, who is popular for many Spanish horror films, and Sergio G. Sanchez. The release date of this movie was December 28th, 2007, and the genre of this film is it is a horror. It's a horror movie. So, to begin with, the movie's themes, motifs, and concerns. One small motif is that the film uses a lot of darkness, which is common in a lot of horror films. I first really noticed it whenever Simone goes into the cave. He's playing his game and he's looking for treasure. The cave is extremely dark, and then just throughout the movie, there's a lot of scenes in the darkness in the house, or it's just panning through the house or showing small objects. It's always dark. They never seem to have the lights on, which kind of just creates a creepy element in a lot of horror films. But one big theme, probably the main theme of this movie, I would say is reality, like the idea of reality versus supernatural things, and trying to explain things through science and psychology and rationality versus things that can't be explained logically or rationally, like supernatural stuff. So this idea is played out a lot through the main characters. Two big ones being Carlos, Laura's husband. He's a doctor, and he looks to explain everything through rationality and medicine, versus Laura, who she believes that there's other supernatural elements coming into play in Simone's disappearance. Some examples of this are Laura meets with the other parents and a psychologist about there's a mother who lost her daughter, and pretty much everybody's telling her that her son is gone, but she just doesn't want to believe it. She believes that there's supernatural elements coming into play. Another big thing with this is whenever they have the medium over and she performs what I believe is like not necessarily a seance, but she does this ritual and goes through the house, and she actually finds the children's like grieving and broken spirits, and basically the medium and Laura want to believe there's supernatural elements coming into play, very obviously, whereas Pilar, the police psychologist, and her husband Carlos, they don't buy it because it's not logical or rational. They won't believe in anything that's not logical or rational. Another big theme is a mother's love for her children. Laura, even though she's an adoptive mother of Simone, she loves him and she refuses to give up the search for him, even whenever Carlos many times tries to get her to give it up and to even leave the house. So, plot overview of this movie. So it begins with, it shows Laura as a child at the orphanage. She's playing with the kids. She's having a great time whenever basically the lady working at the orphanage gets a call that she's being adopted. And then it cuts, and it shows Laura with her husband Carlos, and it shows her son Simone. So it shows a lot that Simone is kind of lonely. He has no friends because he's the only child there. So he plays with imaginary friends. And so a social worker shows up that uninvited about Simone's case. Laura's very confused, and it's revealed that Simone is actually, that's when it's revealed that Simone is adopted and that he has an illness. So after that, Simone shows Laura this game, and he says, my imaginary friends made this game, and he says who Tomas is, and it's the boy with the mask. And he says that basically they take something that you love from you, and you have to look for clues, and you find it, and you have to find back what was taken from you that you love. So at the end of the game, that's whenever Simone reveals that he knows that he's actually adopted, and he gets mad. After that, it shows whenever Laura is having all the potentially adopted children to come to the orphanage, and that's whenever she first sees the boy with the mask, and she believes it's Simone, and he's running around causing havoc. And this is whenever Simone disappears, and it's revealed that the lady that's a social worker was actually not a social worker. I'm doing homework.
Mom told me I could quietly come get your keys.
Okay, get my keys. So basically throughout this movie, Laura is trying to find her son, and she's playing the same game that Simone was. she's looking for her son that she lost and that she loves. And she goes through a lot of clues trying to believe, still believing that her son is alive and that he's been taken and that he's not disappeared. So I know I tried to be kind of like short on the plot review, but so basically just throughout the rest of the movie, she's looking for clues and trying to find her son and trying to contact spirits. So, critical review of the movie. One line that really stuck out to me from Aurora was when the medium is when she says, "Seeing is not believing; it is the other way around." It's kind of eye-opening to me. Like, this is the idea of faith and trust. For example, Laura and Carlos both heard the children, but Laura chooses to believe in what she heard and have faith in it, versus Carlos, who wants to explain everything rationally. So he doesn't buy it. Neither does the police psychologist. So I believe the movie is titled The Orphanage, not just because it was an orphanage when Laura was a child, or because they're wanting to have orphans come into the house, but because Simone was that was like an orphanage to him all along, because he was adopted. So another interesting point that I found was that I found that Laura was playing the game to find Simone actually much earlier in the movie than later. Whenever she first finds the doll, I feel like that was her first clue in the game. The most interesting twist I found was how Peter Pan ties in the story, which I don't want to spoil or anything. So, responding to the author's thesis. Of course, this is a horror movie, so supernatural elements, they aren't necessarily one person's real world beliefs. It's a fantasy implemented into the movie. So it's really more of a surrealist film, because they took the real world and they blended supernatural elements like ghosts into it. And the other idea is that those who died in pain, not just physically but emotionally, leave behind their spirit, still searching for peace. I agree with that thesis to an extent. I'm not like overly superstitious, but I do believe in the possibility that some spirits are sometimes left behind seeking rest. The film seeks to explain that anguished spirits who were injustice in their life can be left behind, not just in the form of a ghost, but the pain that they actually experienced and the injustice that they went through never really goes away, even if they're dead. So, to place this movie in a larger context, it's kind of hard to place a horror movie in like a real life larger context, because it's fiction and this movie is not based on one true event like some horror movies are. But thousands of children do go missing around the world every year. Surely some parents look for logical reasons, like Carlos, who's a doctor and seeks to explain everything rationally. Him just believing that Simone is dead or that he's hopelessly gone. Then there's Laura, on the other hand, who is an obviously grieving parent who is in denial and refuses to give up hope for Simone, and looks to other avenues to explain the loss of her child, like the supernatural element, the game, that Simone was taken, but he's not dead, and that she has to find him. So, overall conclusion, the movie, it begins a little bit slow, but it's very interesting. It's not like any traditional horror or like poltergeist haunting film that could be just chalked up into like a black and white category. It has real life elements and supernatural elements, but one thing that I really like, it doesn't rely on jump scares or like crazy hauntings or serial killers. It has a lot of small things, and the plot is just very interesting that it builds up. So I would say this movie is definitely worth a watch for anyone who loves horror thriller movies and doesn't mind a slower pacing / build up. And that's my movie review for The Orphanage.